Hello, my name is Penny Aymie. I'm a volunteer at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. For the last 3 or 4 years, I've been taking groups of visitors around for a tour of the museum. We talk about various pieces in the collection, and we talk about the stories behind the pieces. Invariably, at the end of the tour, someone will ask me, "What's your favorite piece in the museum?" And I do have one. And today I'm going to share that favorite piece with you. So it's a piece of Scrimshaw. We're going to take a quick look at it and then we'll come back in more detail later. This is a carved tooth from a sperm whale. It's carved in relief, around 360 degrees around the whole tooth, and it is a story. And to give you a sense of how that story fits into everything else, let me give you some background. Scrimshaw, an art form that utilizes mineralized tissue of marine animals. Could be that tooth or teeth from sperm whales. It could be whale bone. It could be baleen. It could be a walrus tusk. So these pieces are carved, engraved, inked, made beautiful. Two different forms. One is purely decorative. You know, that tooth is lovely to look at, as are the others in our collection. But you can't use them to do anything. There really isn't any purpose to them other than being beautiful. The other category is functional. Not only are these pieces beautiful, but you can actually use them to do something. So as an example, we have a huge collection, a huge variety of pie crimpers. These are tools that are used to make that fancy edging around pies. Now, when you look at this collection, you think, whoever would come up with these ideas? They're so creative and they're all so different. Well, these pie crimpers were made for mothers, for sweethearts, for sisters. They're meant to be souvenirs, never created for sale. They were always meant to bring home as a gift. So beside the pie crimpers, there's another functional piece that was very popular called a swift. Swifts were made out of baleen, and they were used, as you can probably see from the picture. Women would put skeins of yarn around them and then wrap them into balls to make it easier to use for crocheting or for knitting. So swifts became a very popular item also to make, to bring home. We have a collection of walking sticks that are they're just amazing, and another huge variety. Take a look at this picture, come in, you'll see these are functional pieces. Not only are they beautiful, but people use them. There are other functional pieces in our collection. You might find tables for sewing, you might find musical instruments. I invite you to come. Our gallery of Scrimshaw is probably worth a visit just on its own. Now, the Scrimshaw piece aside, let's talk about that whole context of the whaling industry. So, whaling industry was hugely successful financially, a money maker. Now, in the 1800s, the money was pouring in. New Bedford became the wealthiest city in the United States. So money, money, money. You know, any successful business has to have an element of risk also. And for whaling, it was danger. So yep, these voyages went out, they made a lot of money. A lot of these ships were lost. All right, they were wrecked, they were lost at sea with all hands. Beside those dangers, well, think about if you've ever seen The Perfect Storm, take a look at those waves and think about the weather. On these long whaling voyages, 3 to 5 years, you must have run into a lot of really bad weather, dangerous. Beside that danger, imagine hunting the whales. You have a small whaleboat with 6 men in it going out to harpoon that whale. This is not the whale ship. These are the smaller whaleboats. Look at the difference in size between puny men and this huge, immense, dangerous animal. One flip of its tail and that boat's going to turn over and sink. If that whale is harpooned and dives, well, he can go down over a mile. He can stay underwater for over an hour. If he pulls you down, you are not going to come back up. So add all the other potential dangers. This was a terribly, terribly dangerous industry. Given all of that, who would be crazy enough to go out on a whaling voyage? Well, when I talk about these people, I kind of put them into three different groups. First group are the men who have to make a living. I use as an example the New Hampshire Farm Board. Now, who gets the farm when the parents die? The oldest boy only. Boy 2, boy 3, you have to go out and make a living on your own. You can work for your brother, not always ideal. You can go to work for someone else if you can find work. Or you can go down to New Bedford and talk to a whaling agent. Whaling agent's going to tell you, well, we pay competitive pay, we give you all your meals, we're going to give you your own bunk, you don't have to share it with anyone. And most importantly, we're going to take you to see the world, to see ports of call your brother will never see. Sign me up. Now, this is the group, the largest group, when you think about it, men who have to make a living, not just the New Hampshire farm boy. We had an incredible amount of immigrants who would come into this country here, and they would sign up to go out on the whaling voyage, help to make our city as diverse as it is. So that's group one, the largest group, people, guys who have to make a living. Second group, I call them the adventurers. These were young men who wanted to go out on one voyage. Well, they wanted to have a fun adventure, see the world before they settled down. Typically, it was one voyage only. Think about Herman Melville. He happened to write Moby Dick, as you know. He went out on one whaling voyage, and I have to believe he hated it. He jumped ship, never even finished his commitment. He did use his experiences as material in some of his writing, but he's just one example of many young men who went out for that last adventure. That's group two. Group three, an important group, not as large as number one, but important. Think about the Quakers for 1 minute, a little side trip here. The Quakers had a huge influence in New Bedford. They did not believe in war. They did not believe in slavery. They did not believe in fancy living. Quakers had a huge influence because they owned so much of the industry here in the New Bedford area. Because of their influence, New Bedford became a major stop on the Underground Railroad. Now that's the route that escaped slaves would take to get to freedom. When they got here to New Bedford, one of the choices they had was to sign up and go on a whaling voyage. What did they gain? Don't forget the dangers involved. Here's what they gained. They were paid for their labor, they learned a new trade, and for 3 to 5 years, they could sleep at night assured that no slave catcher was going to be able to seize them, take them off the ship, and sell them back into slavery. It has to be a huge decision point for them. So that third group is important when we now talk about my favorite piece in the museum. Let's take another look at it now. When we look at this tooth, start at the bottom, you see a man with a rifle, and you see an animal. The animal I first thought was a dog, but on closer examination I see it has spots. And I think it is a jungle cat, and I think this cat is snarling. This is an ominous beginning to any story, a man with a rifle and a very dangerous jungle animal. As you follow the road up around the tooth, what you see are men with their hands tied behind them, being marched somewhere. And as you follow that road up to the top, you see at the top what looks to be a naval officer in uniform. Maybe this is the naval officer who's going to put all of these captured people onto a ship to bring them to their final destination. You'll also see more of these jungle cats. Again, a little scary part of this journey. And then you see what looks to be a minister or a priest with a Bible. It certainly raises the question about what role did religion play in slavery. So as you look at all of this, you ask yourself, who carved this? I gave you 3 different groups of people, very clear. This beautiful piece was carved by an escaped slave. And what he has put into this piece is probably the story of his journey from the time he was captured, marched through the jungles, up to the coast, put on a ship. I look at it and I can't even begin to imagine the fear, the confusion, the sorrow that this person had to have felt throughout that journey, and it felt again as he relived it when he carved this story. So it's my favorite piece for many reasons. It's beautiful, it's exquisitely done, and it has so much feeling and emotion and sadness built into it. So I invite you to come. I want you to see it in person and see all the rest of the pieces in our collection. When you come to the museum, you can ask any volunteer to take you around, talk about some of the various pieces. Ask them what's their favorite piece. I think you're going to be amazed at some of the stories you hear. There's just a never-ending amount here, and I do welcome you, and I thank you so much for spending time with me today so I could talk about my favorite piece. Thanks.